Hi, everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and joining me on today's show, a returning guest. He is the president of the New Paradigm Institute, acclaimed civil rights activist and constitutional lawyer, Mr. Danny Sheehan. Danny, welcome back.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
Good to have you back on. And Danny, I was just saying to you before we hit record, over the last 46 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, I've seen a lot of new listeners and viewers start to get involved with the podcast. And I think that's down to so much has happened since before Christmas to now. More folks are starting to get the UFO bug or a bit of an interest in the topic again. So what I'd love to do is, as many listeners will know who you are, some may not. Can you give a kind of brief introduction as to who Danny Sheehan is and why he's so involved in the UFO conversation?
Sure. I guess the thing that people know most about me right now recently is that I'm the attorney for Lou Elizondo, who was the director of the top secret program inside the United States Pentagon investigating the UFO phenomenon. And I helped Lou work on the complaint that he filed with the Inspector General of the United States Defense Department, complaining about the fact that the Defense Department and our intelligence agencies in the United States were lying to Congress and to the American people in the world about the UFO phenomenon. And I also was the attorney for Dr. John Mack at Harvard University when he wrote a major book about the UFO phenomenon and the abduction phenomenon. I was legal counsel for 20 years for Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project. And prior to that, I was the legal counsel, special counsel to President Carter's investigation of the UFO issue with the National Archives, the Congressional Research Service. So, but other than that, I was, there's other cases that I've done over the years that I was one of the legal counsel for the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case. I was the co-founder of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review at Harvard Law School way back in 1968. And was the fellow the attorney that initiated the case that ended up establishing the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. So that's sort of my general background. I also was the attorney that initiated the major federal criminal racketeering investigation and civil prosecution against the off-the-shelf enterprise of Oliver North and the drug smuggling operations that were going on in Central America by the Central Intelligence Agency. So this is kind of a long 50-year history that I've had with both these other issues, but a lot of the issues dealing with the crimes of the national security state. So that's I'm that lawyer.
So even just outside of the UFO stuff, you've got an incredibly accomplished and varied CV there. And then within the UFO conversation, you have covered quite a lot of bases. And I think quite often I see online people use Lou Elizondo as Stephen Greer as almost two ends of a spectrum to talk about the UFO conversation. And I think you're involved with so many groups and committees and organizations as well throughout those times. And now if folks go back and listen to previous interviews, they'll hear about some of those as well, including obviously the New Paradigm Institute, which you're the president of.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that that puts you in a pretty good place. You must have a level of knowledge and opinion garnered through those decades, which that must really help you in kind of making up your mind as to where things are at right now and where you see things going.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it does put me in that kind of an interesting position.
On that though, then, so the New Paradigm Institute newsletter, which I'm signed up to, and I would recommend folks click the link on the description and go and sign up to that. It's completely free. Dated the 6th of February, you stated that January 2025 has been one of the most pivotal months in years in the fight for UFO transparency. Take us through why you think that is.
Well, what's happened now is the United States Congress has now finally sort of awakened, and they have come to realize now that they are in possession of information from extremely credible firsthand witnesses from inside the United States intelligence agencies and the United States military, confirming that the United States is in possession of one or more non-human origin spacecraft, extraterrestrial spacecraft, and the bodies of the occupants of these craft, which they've now confirmed are non-human. And they've also got witnesses that have come forth to Congress telling them in a completely convincing manner that there are secret elements inside the United States military and intelligence agencies who are working with private for-profit aerospace corporations to back engineer some of the technology of these UFO craft to make weapons, special weapons system and propulsion systems for weapons for the United States. And this is extraordinarily troubling to a lot of the people inside the military and inside the intelligence agencies. And so they've come forward to talk to Congress, first behind closed doors, to tell the Congress about this and the fact that the American intelligence agencies and military services are lying to Congress, denying that they have any such craft and denying that they're engaged in any such programs. Now the Congress has confronted them, and most recently, they have the House Oversight Committee, a very powerful and important committee in the Congress, has established a special task force to actively investigate the issue of the UFOs and whatever this non-human intelligence is that's responsible for them. And they now have a Congressman Comer, who is the chairman of the powerful House Oversight Committee, has agreed that he will provide subpoena power to the members of the task force to dig into this issue, to find out what the documents are that show that this is true and who the witnesses are that can confirm this in more detail. And so that the creation of this new task force is extraordinarily important. And now that President Donald Trump has been inaugurated, he has declared that he is going to insist upon being briefed in on all of the information that we have about the UFO phenomenon and what extraterrestrial or conceivably extra-dimensional non-human intelligence is responsible for this phenomenon. And he has agreed he's going to share this with the American people and the world. So these are a lot of extraordinary developments that have occurred in just the last couple of months. And so here we find ourselves in February with going back and forth to Washington, D.C. and other places, interviewing confidential sources. And they're now coming forward, even independent of the Congress. And you get people like Jake Barber and Fred Baker and a number of the other people, and Ross Coulthart from Australia is interviewing these people. And News Nation, a major channel a television channel in the United States, has agreed to have Ross Coulthart have a program where he interviews these people regularly, and so that and we're getting direct firsthand eyewitnesses who have actually been involved in the crash retrieval program of UFOs, which has been officially denied by official government officials inside the Defense Department and the intelligence agencies, which the Congress now knows are false. So now we're in this phase of the discovery process, where we're interviewing these firsthand witnesses and presenting them to Congress and putting pressure on Congress to have public hearings about all of this, because the New Paradigm Institute, which we founded out of our public interest organization, has in fact been organizing citizens in all 435 congressional districts around the country to mobilize, write letters to the editor of their local newspapers, go on their local television programs, go to their local television news stations, to go to their high schools and colleges to have briefings of the citizens ourselves. And very importantly, there's now a major movement in the United States now that the witnesses from inside the government have come forward and asserted publicly and to the Congress that there is a means by which you can communicate with the pilots and occupants of the UFO craft through, surprisingly enough, telepathy, mental telepathy. And so that there are citizens groups now organizing around the country and indeed around the world to actually go out into the fields and sit in circles and reach up kind of telepathically to try to establish direct citizen diplomacy with the occupants of the UFOs. And they're not being called crazy anymore. And that was one of the major tactics of the American intelligence community and the military, who were trying to keep the secret that they had these UFOs. That was to say people were basically mentally ill or crazy if they believed in that UFOs were real. And so now we've crossed that barrier where everybody now knows that they're real, and that there's a way for individual citizens to reach out and potentially have direct diplomatic communication with the occupants to take that out of the exclusive hands of the military and the intelligence agency people. And so that's what's happening right now. That's this extraordinary movement that's going on across the world right now. And so people are now tuning in to podcasts such as yours and others, and with Ross Coulthart's television show, etc. And people are now starting to listen to people like Luis Elizondo, who's been trying to tell the public about this. And he's now written a book which has gone to the top of the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list, called Imminent, talking about the reality of the UFO phenomenon. And they're beginning to give more and more credit now to people like Dr. Stephen Greer, who's been working for decades to try to share information with the people of the world about this UFO phenomenon. And even though Luis Elizondo and Dr. Greer have differing perspectives on this and are inclined to say so publicly, the reality is that they're both engaged in trying to get substantially more information out to the people of the world about this. And Dr. Greer is suspicious of the ultimate motives of the national security state people in the United States, which everyone has a right to be, because of their dissembling and lying and actually destroying the lives of innocent people who've been trying to communicate information about this over the past decades. And on the other hand, Luis Elizondo is extraordinarily concerned about the UFO phenomenon potentially being a national security threat, which from his perspective, he believes to be true. And so that we have good faith Americans having different perspectives on this, and good faith people all across the world. Now parliaments in other countries are coming forward and seeing what the United States Congress is doing, holding public hearings about this, are now starting to discuss having hearings in their countries to reveal what it is that their military and intelligence services know about this phenomenon. So this is an extraordinarily exciting time and a pivotal time in all of human history. If we are on the brink of getting absolute, indisputable confirmation of the reality of the UFO phenomenon and the fact that they are of extraterrestrial origin, and meaning that there's life elsewhere in the universe, intelligent, highly technologically developed, but non-human life in the universe, we're approaching the point that's going to be a dividing point in potentially all of human history. There's the before we knew that we were part of a galactic civilization, and after. So, I mean, it's actually conceivable that all time will be measured. Instead of from the birth of Christ in Western civilization, or from the founding of certain dynasties in China, it's going to be found. It's going to be based upon that crossing that barrier, and to realizing that we're galactic citizens, and that we will be having to have compute our time from this period. And so we have a period now over the next 2-year period between now and the next elections in the United States here, that will be in November of 2026, for this administration, now that they're in control of the House and the Senate and the White House, and substantial influence in the American judiciary branch, they have this golden opportunity right now to do what President Trump has promised they're going to do, is extract all of this information from the national security state and make it public. And that's what's happening. So this is going to be probably it could well be, if we can avoid more warfare, and even the potential threat of thermonuclear war, if we can get through this next 2-year period and bring to fruition the promises of this administration pertaining to the UFO issue, we may be witnessing in the next 2-year period the most important 2-year period in the entire history of the human family. And here we are, privileged to be here, to be all participating in this extraordinary process, which people will be looking back 1,000 years from now, looking back at this as an absolutely transitional period in human history, and we get to all participate in it. So that's what your show is about, and you've been telling people about this for months and months and months, and now here the time has arrived where this is actually happening right in front of everybody.
You know, Danny, you are the human equivalent of ChatGPT for the UFO topic. When someone asks what UFOs are, I want to dive into so much of that, and I'm glad I've got notes on quite a lot of it already, so which is really good. It's handy. You mentioned the Stephen Greer and Lou Elizondo thing, and I want to bring that up. I don't know if you remember in the 90s or 2000s. I'm sure you were incredibly busy. There was a program on MTV called Celebrity Deathmatch.
Yeah, I do remember that.
If that was still going, then I'm sure those two would have been on there in puppet form already, just given the nature of how the UFO community treats both camps. How do you think that juxtaposition and positions for those two affects the UFO topic? Because like you say, they both have some very strong claims that contradict the other. So is it a case of a lot of folks look at that and go, well, one of them's lying, or they're both lying, or it's something in between? How do you kind of view those two very differing, characters?
Well, it's an interesting thing because, I was for 20 years the legal counsel for the Disclosure Project of Stephen Greer, and since 2021, I've been legal counsel for Lou, both of them, and so I'm quite familiar with what the challenge is here that we have, and that is that our people in Western civilization are very much trained to engage in the dialectic of good guys versus bad guys. One rugby team versus another, or one football team or basketball team or baseball team, and people get caught in this. It's a dynamic that entertains people and draws them in. And there's a tendency, therefore, to try to push people into camps to entertain and sort of titillate people. And what's happened here is that I think that that people are attempting to kind of goad different proponents in the UFO field into conflict with each other for entertainment purposes. And now, so that if you look at Dr. Greer and Luis Elizondo, you can see that both of them agree that the UFOs are real, which it sets them both apart from a significant majority of people in positions of power and influence for decades who didn't dare say that. Both of them have dared to say that and to go forward and tell people that it's true. Both of them have insisted that the United States military and the intelligence community have been lying to Congress, about this. Both of them are extremely concerned that because of that, that secrecy that's been maintained, the right decisions are not being made about how we explore the question of the UFO phenomenon and the extraterrestrial intelligence that is responsible for them. We don't have citizen involvement in it. We don't have expert scientists, the leading people in the various fields that are being given access to the information to try to evaluate it. They also agree that the United States Congress needs to step forward and take a much more active role in this in order to maintain the constitutional structures of our government. Both of them recognize that the continuation of the secrecy poses significant threats to the safety of the people, because the people that are in charge of the program are so deeply secret about it all, and that they've been utilizing the technology of the UFOs to actually try to develop weapon systems that could present an entire new level of conflict and potential devastation to our planet. They agree on all of these things, okay? And so that on a scale of 1 to 100, there's probably 75% of everything that both Lou Elizondo and Dr. Stephen Greer believe and agree on. Then there's 25% of it is a little different because they come from different perspectives. And Dr. Greer has been convinced for many years that the deep state in the United States, the deep intelligence agencies and secret military programs are dangerous, that they are so dedicated to the dialectic over and against Russia and over and against China, over and against the countries that disagree with our American capitalist system, basically, that they're willing to resort to all kinds of perfidy and criminal conduct, political assassinations, drug smuggling, lying, supporting death squads, etc. All of which is true. And in the 20 years that I spent being legal counsel to Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project, I was very clear and forthright about that being true. And that was part of our alliance. And because of that, what Dr. Greer has done is said that it's very dangerous to leave the control and knowledge of this UFO phenomenon in the extraterrestrial intelligence in the hands of those people who are willing to do those kind of things. And one of the things that Dr. Greer and I both came to know during the 20-year period that I was legal counsel for the Disclosure Project was that our United States military and intelligence community has actually been willing to engage in generating what we call false flag military operations. For example, with Operations Northwoods that people know about, that the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, actually military Joint Chiefs of Staff, an intelligence CIA agency, proposed back in the 1960s, actually dressing up anti-Castro Cubans in Cuban uniforms and having them physically, militarily attack Guantanamo, our Navy base at Guantanamo, and actually kill American service people and sink American military craft, and to actually go into Miami and blow up shopping malls and kill people, targeting specifically the anti-Castro Cuban refugee community, so that they would enrage that community that would rise up and authorize our military to militarily attack and invade the island of Cuba. That is all true, okay? And because of that, Dr. Greer has said, look, if the same elements deeply buried inside the national security state of the United States are exclusively in control of the secret information about UFOs and the extraterrestrial civilization, they may actually be willing to plan a false flag attack. If they're using the technology that they've recovered from some of these craft to back engineer craft that look and act virtually identically to the UFO craft, that is not beyond them to actually stage a fake UFO invasion in order to strengthen the hand of the national security state, even to the point of invoking the continuity of government provisions that they have, of being able to have the military and the executive branch take over all of the legislative and judicial functions in the country, all in the eyes of a potential thermonuclear war. Now, so that Dr. Greer has become convinced that unless we get this information exposed and shared with Congress and take steps to get this information communicated to the people of the world, that people inside the national security state of the United States might be tempted to actually carry such a plan into effect. And so he has been putting that front and center in a lot of his communications, because from his perspective, knowing what he does know, he thinks that that's such a danger that he wants to warn people against this and try to deter any kind of temptation that they might have to do such a thing. Now, on the other hand, Luis Elizondo, who is a person who has been raised in the military community and comes from a family in Miami, where, interestingly enough, they're part of the very anti-Castro Cuban community that was targeted by Operation Northwoods to actually blow them up and kill them in the shopping malls. And he comes out of that community, and he's joined the military and has spent his life in the military. And he very clearly, once he got put into possession of information about the reality of the UFO phenomenon and the kind of activities that were being engaged in, he became extraordinarily concerned that this activity on the part of the UFO vehicles constituted a threat to the national security of the United States. And he was put in a position by both, I'll point out, both the Republican and Democratic Party, both. He was charged with responsibility for trying to think through what the potential threats might be that would be posed by a foreign power, even if it's extraterrestrial. For example, shutting off all of the nuclear missiles at a military base, such as in Maelstrom in Montana and other places, and surveilling secret military facilities and following our nuclear aircraft carriers around in the ocean. And from his perspective, that very definitely constitutes a threat to the national security of the United States, because he conflates the maintenance of those kind of military and even nuclear capacities as an essential element of our national defense. And so the two of them, even though they agree on 75% of all the factual reality, they have this other 25% coming from their respective perspectives that has caused people to pay a lot more attention to that 25% of the things on which they disagree. And because that disagreement is so focused, the people have, in a sense, solicited that information from them that's in that 25% area. And it's now started to cause people to be fascinated by that kind of conflict, even to the point, I mean, when you have a culture that has games like you were talking about before, where they have on television cage fighting, when you have a culture that is so stimulated into that kind of combat, that kind of almost lethal combat, in that they take a titillation from that, they're tempted to try to overemphasize, I think, the degree to which Dr. Greer and Luis Elizondo, both of whom have been my personal friends and still are, right, that they emphasize the conflict between them instead of the positive things. So I believe that in light of the fact that one of the things that our human family has to be able to do in order to effectively and productively engage with the extraterrestrial civilization is we have to be able to get over this kind of desire on the part of our species to engage in conflict with each other. And to have that be such a central dynamic in our relationships with each other, we have to demonstrate that we're worthy of actually having a positive and constructive bilateral relationship with another species, with another civilization, before they're going to trust us, before they're going to be willing to allow us to come out into their region. And they especially aren't going to allow us to bring nuclear weapons out into their territory. And so that we've got to confront this issue, and we have this extraordinary advantage here of two of the preeminent voices in the field of attempting to secure disclosure. We have this extraordinarily important opportunity to try to see if we can get people in their two camps to share their legitimate perspectives with each other, to get past this, so that we can assist these two men, friends of mine and clients of mine, to transcend this type of conflict with each other, and to avoid the temptation of being goaded into this, like in high school, where two guys start having an argument and people start gathering around them going, fight, 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 trying to force them into this. And it doesn't help that we have people interviewing them respectively who are cage fighters. Right.
Yeah.
And are proud of being cage fighters, and trying to generate that kind of energy. And so I'm sort of on the other side of that process. I'm trying to get to bring people together, to get them to share their information together, to acknowledge that there are differences in perspective, and try to explore what potential legitimacy there is to the other person's perspective. And nobody can reasonably acknowledge that the flight of completely unknown vehicles over the top of a nuclear missile facility and shutting off all of the missiles can't reasonably be perceived by those in charge of the security of such facilities to be some kind of a threat to them. And on the other hand, nobody who is familiar with the background of the activities of our deep national security state with regard to assassinations and drug smuggling and the actual proposal of false flag military attacks to blame on some adversary. Anybody who's familiar with that deep history cannot fail to understand that a person could reasonably and in good faith come to suspect that element in our national security state infrastructure is capable of doing something like utilizing the technology that they're recovering from the craft, building fake craft, and actually having a fake false flag attack to generate more power for themselves. These are both, and the problem is I have to be extremely careful, because if I publicly attribute good faith to either or both of these gentlemen, the other one has been pushed into a point of viewing that as a bad thing, to acknowledge there's any good faith perspective that the other could share, and so that what I'm hoping to do, that I don't talk about this very freely, but when that it's coming to the point now where people are all talking about it, because we've got people who are ardently supportive of both of them, and feel that it's necessary for them, therefore, if they're a quote supporter of that person, to oppose the other person. It's that whole red team, blue team, I mean, and so that I think that it's a simple enough observation for people who have watched the Super Bowl and watch cage fighting and watch rugby teams and soccer teams, football teams of their own countries, where the fans from the two different teams end up getting in massive fistfights on the field, to say that is a level of consciousness that our human family is capable of, that we have to address, that we have to try to transcend that kind of low consciousness that may have served us at one time, millions of years ago, when it was necessary for tribes to fight over a water hole for survival. But we're hopefully past that point, and that we should avoid that kind of low consciousness activity, and not have people of good faith be goaded into these kind of conflicts with each other, which is not that constructive. Even to the point, I mean, that we have now, two main political parties in most countries that fight each other like that. And for anybody to recognize and grant the legitimacy of the point of one of their opposing political parties is ostracized by their political party members, and that this is a great test for our people, a great test for our human family right now, to be able to utilize this opportunity that we have to reach out to the stars and actually become a spacefaring species, to be able to demonstrate that we can overcome this. And so that this is a challenge that's right in front of us. We can see it in personal ways. And that it presents a great opportunity, I think, for us to help transcend this and qualify to be citizens of the galaxy. But we'll see. I know both of these gentlemen, and I hope that we can help overcome this problem right now.
You make a lot of really interesting points there around the Elizondo and Greer camps, and I just want to ask one more thing. Given your relationship with them professionally and personally, have you ever tried to bring them together to have that conversation in person?
Well, I'm sort of in that process now, because historically I've refused to answer the kind of question that you've been asking me, but I think that it's becoming so important now, that there's so much activity going on now, and we're engaging. That we have been successful in achieving an absolutely bipartisan support for disclosure inside the Democratic and Republican parties. We actually, the New Paradigm Institute and the others that have been working in the same field, the Sol Foundation, the UAP Disclosure Fund, MUFON, all of us that have been around for a long time are all extraordinarily happy about the fact that we've been as successful as we all have been together to bring about not only a nonpartisan, but an act of bipartisan support for disclosure with the two political parties in the United States. And so that because of this extraordinarily important opportunity, we want to have the benefit given to Congress of both of these gentlemen, of the perspectives that they have, so that we can explore what the reality is with regard to not only the things that they both support, but things that they may differ on. And so so I've agreed to answer the questions, because I've been on your show, and I highly respect you, and I know that you're asking that question from a completely legitimate perspective. You're not trying to titillate anybody or to stimulate this kind of conflict between the two of them. You're really wanting to explore the opportunity for some kind of cooperation between the different camps within the community. And so therefore I'm willing in this context with you, Andy, to answer that question. And others who ask the question from what I understand and believe to be a good faith perspective, I think that this is the process by means of which we can help resolve some of this conflict between different camps inside our community, and demonstrate that we're worthy, I think, of the respect of Congress as a movement, as a citizens movement, and support the positive outreach on the part of people to the UFO vehicles themselves, so that they say, this is a human community that's genuinely trying to transcend the type of dialectical, antagonistic kind of activity that they are concerned about us bringing into their territory by leaving the planet and leaving our solar system and coming to engage with them. That we need to be able to show them that we can overcome this lower tendency that we have developed historically.
So one of the points you made before was about this, I've called it a few times, this age of the whistleblower we appear to have entered, where we seem to have waited in 2024 for these whistleblowers to come forward after Grush in 2023, and it never quite happened. And then lo and behold, 2025 arrives and bang, we've got one after another, it seems, which has opened up a whole range of conversation. What's been your take on, it seems Jake Barber at the forefront right now, and he has Fred Baker, Don Paul, and I've just had John Bledsoe on the podcast recently as well, backing up his story. What is your take on that story? And I want to ask the public perception of that as well. And I'll just give you a little bit of context. I was on a friend of mine's podcast just the other day, and that's not a UFO podcast. It's more general conversation, societal stuff, quite tongue-in-cheek, but Scottish-based humour, okay? And they asked about the UFO stuff right at the beginning. And it was quite a difficult conversation to still have with them, because quite often in the community and online, I see people comment that the public's ready for this conversation, the public's ready for the woo, the experiencers, psionics, telepathy. I find it the opposite. And speaking to these two guys who are just same as me, general public, but no interest in UFOs, I sent them the link to the News Nation 41-minute piece with Jake Barber. And as I kind of thought would happen, and this isn't for everyone, but generally, they found it reasonably interesting hearing about the crash retrieval stuff. As soon as he mentioned his experience, the femininity, the divine, and the psionics, they both basically called BS on it, and they were like, "Nah, that completely turned them off." And I think that's still the place of most of the public. Is that unfair?
Well, it's interesting. It's going to be an additional challenge to if with regard to the first part of it, getting people to say, "Oh, okay, I'm getting persuaded that there are really craft, that they may well be extraterrestrial." I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to get people to come to grips with. And there's been a lot of discussion about this inside the circles that where Luis Elizondo and both Dr. Greer, work all the time. That because they know that there's this dimension to it. There's this extraordinary additional dimension having to do with consciousness and telepathy and the operating of the vehicles with telepathy, etc. And that there's been an inclination to try to avoid that until we get people to at least understand that the UFO phenomenon is real, and that the consensus among those who are really familiar with it is that they appear to be extraterrestrial in their origins. And even those who think that they're extra dimensional are open to the possibility that what appears to be extra dimensional may be a function of the way that they travel, the way that they come here from their different star systems, that they go into some kind of a high, ultra high frequency vibrational state where they can move instantaneously, more or less. And when they uncloak or they lower their vibrational frequency, they come into visible form or material manifestation. And then people think that that's an extra dimensional phenomenon. But the bottom line is that's challenging enough right there to get people to come to grips with that. And so that there's a temptation historically to try to postpone, at least, just like you would in baking a cake, that there are certain ingredients that you put together to begin with, and you have to put them together in the right order in order for the cake to work out right, and if you put them together incorrectly, it won't work. And that's why some people, such as Luis Elizondo and others, believe that there needs to be a reasonably controlled process by means of which this disclosure takes place, so that people can be given the information that they can absorb and that they can integrate and they can come to believe, and then be given more information, etc. Now, Dr. Greer and others in the UFO community so distrust the national security state and the military in the intelligence community that has been lying not only lying for these past at least 80 years, but have been engaged in actual criminal conduct against private citizens who have been trying to share this information, to suppress it. And so that they distrust them so much that they believe that any authority that that community has to control the disclosure is going to be misused and abused. Okay, and so that's why Dr. Greer and others advocate, let's have all the information, let's have it all instantaneously, let's have it all come out at one time. But Andy, I think you're pointing out a very important direct experience where you come to realize that the vast majority of people in our human society can't absorb that kind of stuff all at one time. They can say, okay, I'm good with the first, 50% of it, but when you cross into this other area, all of a sudden they shut down and they call BS on it, and they don't want to hear it. And so this is a dramatic demonstration of exactly what the issue is that we're having to work on inside the UFO disclosure community, of how do we responsibly and ethically engage in phasing out this information to people so that they can actually absorb it. The Sufis have an ability to create stories that have 4 or 5 different levels or dimensions to them, so that people can hear as much of the story and get as much of the lesson, the moral lesson that is implicit in the story of the Sufis. They're trying to get through to people, and that we're trying to figure that out now. How can we, in a sense, create a Sufi presentation that can be heard by everyone at the particular level of consciousness where they are, without freaking people out? But there is no way to ultimately avoid the relevance, the central relevance of this issue of consciousness, and the effect that it's in the years I spent with Dr. Mack. I was Dr. Mack's lawyer for 10 years, from 1994 until his passing in 2004. And this is one of the major issues that Dr. Mack came to grips with. Is that he had initially started out thinking that the people were mentally ill who thought that they'd been abducted. Then he started becoming convinced that, well, they were in fact experiencing something very real, whatever it was. Then he came to realize that it appeared to be extraterrestrial. And then he came to realize deeper and deeper as he got into this, that it was having this kind of consciousness effect upon the abductees, that they were ascending into a higher and higher state of consciousness, to the point where many of them, most of them, began to experience this as a positive event in their life, which they started out being terrified of it. Okay. And so that John Mack went through this evolutionary process where he realized that this had this spiritual dimension, this consciousness dimension, and he began writing about it more as he got deeper into it. So I believe that this is one of the issues that we have to come to grips with, and what we're trying to do now is we're trying to assemble a source of authority that can be trusted, since we don't trust the national security state. That is too attached to this dialectic of trying to, the old saying, the Sufi saying again, is when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. And so that people inside the military intelligence community, when they encounter the UFO phenomenon, instead of saying, holy mackerel, look at this, beings from an entire extraterrestrial civilization, what an astonishing opportunity that we have here to learn new things and expand. And so they say, holy shit, this is really dangerous. These people can go faster than our jet fighters. Boy, we'd love to get our hands on that technology so we can make bigger weapons. And so that Lou has been surrounded by those people. And he's been working in that milieu for all this time. And he has been perceived by some of those people as being a guy who is ascended into a higher state of consciousness, really, inside his military community, that he's in a higher state of consciousness. He's actually trying to get something done that they thought was contrary to the secrecy that was necessary to protect the national security state. And so he's being challenged by the people in his community. And Dr. Greer is having the same kind of experience over there, that a number of people in the community, are angry at him. And so we're trying to get past all of that. I'm hoping to try to get past all of that. But I hear exactly what you're saying, and I take a very, very important lesson from what you're saying, of how we have to choreograph this information coming out to the people in a sound and responsible way that is completely ethical, but also effective. And that's what we need to do. I'm hoping that we can get the House Oversight Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee engaged in some sort of a joint committee that is working on figuring out exactly where that balance is, of to how rapidly we bring this information forward. I know the means by which we do. Now, that Steven Spielberg, who has produced the major motion picture, E.T. and the Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He also did this television series that's been lost to history called Taken, that he did. And he's also done a television series, a documentary series called Encounters. And he's now getting ready in 2026 to produce and display a movie called Disclosure. And so that is going to play, I think, some significant role in helping to conscientize or raise the consciousness of a vast viewing audience to try to understand this. So we're trying to figure out, exactly how he's going to pitch this. How is he going to strike that balance? But you'll know. Remember, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the Richard Dreyfuss character and the others were all somehow being affected psychically. That they were all being drawn to this mountain. There was some kind of thing happening there. So even Steven Spielberg was aware of this kind of interesting dimension to the whole thing, where Richard Dreyfuss would sit there and build this mountain out of his mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
And so that he's touched on this issue in an adroit way. And I'm hoping he's going to continue to do that in his upcoming movie. But it's a very real challenge that you present here, and I think it's appreciated by the people that are working with Lou Elizondo of how we choreograph all this. And I've had conversations with Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ and other people who have been involved in that side of it. That whole issue of consciousness and its extraordinarily central role in this issue, and I'm hoping that we can solve this if we can find a sound and responsible, authoritative entity to be working with, whether it's this task force or whether it's the 9-person panel that has been proposed by the Senate in their 2023 Senate bill. The big 64-page bill that they proposed, this 9-person panel. We're trying to establish some entity that can be trusted and has the authority to make decisions about this. Our New Paradigm Institute is mobilizing the people, the actual people in all the congressional districts and in other countries, trying to get the information that we have vetted and that we believe is solid and can really be trusted. And so we're trying to play a role in this at the newparadigminstitute.org, so people can contact us. It's totally free. People can become members of the New Paradigm Institute. They can become members of Citizens for Disclosure, which are going to be working in each of their congressional districts, in each of their states, and in each of their countries around the world to get their state legislature or their federal legislatures into action on this. Because those are the proper people that are the elected representatives of the citizenry. And those are the people that need to be involved in this process, not just the national security state people, that are inside the executive branch of their government. So that's what we're engaged in right now, of trying to shift the center of authority in dealing with this issue into the legislature. And frankly, the history is that the people in the military and in the intelligence communities hold in comparatively low regard the elected representatives of the people. They view them as, frat boys, people that are just in trying to get attention, or always running for office, and and are at the political whims of their financing entities, and so that is not a healthy attitude. And it's not a healthy attitude in a democracy to have your national security state people perceiving the elected representatives as people that you need to keep in the dark, that you need to lie to and deceive, because you can't trust them. We need to overcome that, and we need to have the elected representatives conduct themselves in a responsible manner, so that the national security people who have legitimate concerns in their perspective of national security issues, that they respect those legislature entities. And we need to get the UFO community, that partly is represented by Dr. Stephen Greer and his longtime devotion to this issue, to begin to have confidence in congressionally elected representatives to do this, even if they don't trust entirely the national security state people because of their bad history. Okay, so I find this to be an extraordinarily challenging and interesting period. if you hadn't gathered that so far, this is extraordinary. What's going on? I've been in this, for 47 years. Ever since I was first contacted by the the Congressional Research Service and asked to become special counsel to the investigation on behalf of President Carter. So I've been witness to this over 47 years. And I'm delighted that we're at a stage where we're actually being able to make substantial progress here. I'm deeply appreciative of yourself and your show. I mean, your show is respected by people all around the world. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to get to discuss these things with you and with your listeners.
No, thanks. It's respected by some. I'm sure there's some people who hate it, but we'll go with the ones who like it. You mentioned those representatives, and I'm actually glad we ended up delaying this by a week, because in the week, Representative Anna Paulina Luna announced there was something coming, big announcement. There was a whole load of rumor going around as to what it was going to be. I had the impression, just looking at other people's opinion who I would respect, who thought it would be something around transparency, but not necessarily directly UFO related, but it could impact the UFO topic. And I think that's pretty much correct. So you've got Representative Luna and Representative Comer. They announced the establishment of the task force on the declassification of federal secrets. And for the layman out there, essentially they are going after 9/11, UFOs, JFK, Martin Luther King, COVID, the Epstein list. If you were writing a big book of conspiracy files to be released in 2025,
yes,
in 6 months, they are going to try and uncover the biggest, quote unquote conspiracies of all time.
We've got to get that expanded. That's not realistic.
How do you view that?
No. That's one of the very first things that our New Paradigm Institute is directing our attention to, is to mobilize the citizenry to say, look, this is not responsible. I mean, to have this many deep conspiracies investigated and exposed within a 6-month period is not realistic. And the one thing you don't do in Washington, D.C. is you don't set a time limit on a project like that, because the opponents, once they know what the time limit is, they know how to drag their feet and delay things and hold you off and make you go to court, and they aren't going to be able to succeed. So we want to get this expanded to at least 2 years, because this administration has a 2-year period before the elections in November of 2026, where they're going to be in a certain sense almost unchallenged authority. And if they're serious about revealing the secrets deeply buried with regard to the UFO issue, they need to concentrate on this for this 2-year period and to get this information out. You'll notice that the Senate, when we passed the bill back in 2023, the 64-page bill, implicit in that was a 7-year period. there was a 7-year period that was designated in that act within which they had to complete this process. That's a much more realistic view, but that's being opposed by people in the UFO community as way too long a period. But I think a 2-year period for the task force that is in the House side is a more realistic time frame. Now, and as you probably do know, I mean that I've been involved in that. I was in Attorney F. Lee Bailey's office. I was one of the 3 trial lawyers in F. Lee Bailey's office during the Watergate burglary, and we represented James McCord, the CIA wiretapping specialist who blew the whistle on Richard Nixon and the whole White House plumbers unit. And we came to realize in that investigation that at the root of the Watergate burglary was, in fact, the JFK assassination. And I've talked with, I was on the Danny Jones show a while ago, and he actually started asking me about that. And we spent like a whole hour or more going into detail about what the unique information is that I happen to have come into contact with pertaining to the JFK assassination. And so that we can be of some assistance to the task force in that as well. That can be dealt with fairly quickly because we have detailed information about exactly what it is that happened in there, because we interviewed Santos Trafficante. He was one of our clients at the firm, which I didn't know when I joined it. But the bottom line is he was directly involved in creating the assassination team that ended up killing the president. And so we have that detailed information. So those 2 issues, I think, with those 2 issues focused upon, who are, if you had to identify the 2 most controversial yet credible conspiracy theories in the world, they are those 2 things: the UFO issue and the Kennedy assassination. Those are the 2 key things. So I think that they need to concentrate for the first 6 months on both of those things, while we try to get the time period expanded to at least a 2 full year period to look at the other things. I'm not very interested in all the Jeffrey Epstein things. And they're also going to add into it now the killing of Osama bin Laden. There's a whole other thing. We happen to know that because of being in Washington and talking with their staff and stuff, that we know that they're planning to try to add that onto the list of whether he was really killed or not. Like it doesn't make any sense to any of us that they would have gotten to Osama bin Laden after all that time and all the stuff he knew and all the information he had, that they're just going to kill him. And then, oh, by the way, we threw his body out of a helicopter into the ocean because we didn't want anybody to know. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to anybody, and the same thing is true of 9/11. That nobody with a IQ above room temperature believes that Building 7 just sort of fell down like that. So that these are things that are important in people's consciousness. But in my opinion, the UFO issue is so transcendent in its importance, and it's so profound in its full implications, that we need to concentrate on that right at the beginning of this. And that has been actually the impetus for the creation of this particular task force. So that's going to be part of our objective of the New Paradigm Institute, is to get the UFO question front and center in that task force as soon as possible, and to expand its time period to 2 years.
Very slight sidebar. I always try and keep away from talking about UFOs, conspiracy stuff, especially in my day job. A lot of folks don't know I have this podcast where I work. And just the other day, there happened to be 2 of us in the office, and I shared this on the Discord chat, and I got talking to this other guy who I don't know too well, but we've worked together for years. And he found out about the podcast, and within 20 minutes of going from nuts and bolts UFOs, it's really funny you mention it, I was talking about World Trade Center building number 7 collapsing, and he genuinely was like, I've got no idea that even happened, that another building collapsed that day. And I was like, oh god, yeah. I showed him the video, and there's a whole thing about the BBC reporting it 20 minutes before it happened, and then it happened, and very strange, but whole other podcast, whole other show. I want to ask you then, generally, we've got this new administration come in. So we've gone from Biden to Trump part 2. How big an impact do you think this administration can have with Trump at the helm, who admittedly, a lot of folks seem very confident that he could be the president to bring about real change in terms of disclosure? He himself has said on multiple occasions he isn't a believer.
That's right.
Is that not a roadblock still to all of this?
Well, I mean, it's a challenge, but I mean, a lot of people aren't believers of certain extraordinary things until they see the evidence. You know, I mean, that's just true. And that he doesn't know. You know, I mean, a person who's completely ignorant of the facts pertaining to a given subject, you know, doesn't believe a certain thing. But once you're shown the facts and the detailed information, you know, he's a very intelligent guy. The concern that we have about Trump is that he has a tendency to want to seek personal advantage all the time in things. It's kind of a motive that he has, in that there's some concern that when he gets briefed in detail about what all the details are pertaining to the UFO issue and the extraterrestrial technology or civilization, that he might try to take some personal advantage in it. You know, and that's a concern. But those of us who are willing to grant him good faith to start with in an administration like this, you know, hope that he's going to be so overwhelmed by the reality of this that he's going to feel disposed actually to engage in the public interest, you know, and make this available in a sound and responsible manner. And the reality is that very peculiarly, he, as you suggest, might actually be much more inclined to do something like this than any other president that we could have had right now, because he is so iconoclastic. You know, he isn't caught up in, you know, maintaining all of the momentum of the normalcy that the other administrations kind of major in. Okay, and so that he has a real opportunity to do something extraordinary and to reveal this information. And we have to get a look at now a lot of the people that are going to be surrounding him as his advisors, et cetera, that may try to talk him out of it. But he's promised several times to do it, you know, publicly during his campaign, that he would in fact secure all the information about the UFO issue and make it public. He said he'll do that. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to hold him to his word on that.
Another thing that's kind of happened over the last couple of days that I want to get your thoughts on before we answer some listener questions, Danny, is that Dean Johnson has published the additional questions that were answered off the back of the congressional hearings back in November. And a lot of folks split opinion at the time on the hearing, how it went, the impact of it. Was it as profound as the Grush hearing previously? It was all very much, you know, everyone's opinion. I've seen a lot of folks very responsive to Lou Elizondo's answers that were given in the 11 questions. Have you had time to go over the questions and Lou's answers? Yeah,
absolutely, I did. Yes.
What is your take on this then? And just to give a very brief overview, folks. So the questions from Representative Eric Burleson, who I almost got cancelled hosting him on this podcast once, where he wore a jumper where folks thought he was dressed as some kind of Nazi, but it was actually a sports jumper, and it just had an awkwardly placed red band on the arm. And there was a whole joke about it, but even Eric was like, Jesus, yeah, I can see how that now looked. So folks go back and watch that. That's almost got a congressman cancelled. That was a claim to fame for me. But he asked Lou Elizondo 11 questions, which included: do any branch of the US government or defense contractor possess technology derived from a non-human source? Do they US military or defense contractors employ exotic materials of non-human or non-terrestrial origin? Is it possible UAPs are extra-dimensional rather than interdimensional? It was very much on the nose questions.
Yes.
And a lot of folks seem much more pleased and happy with Lou's answers to these questions than we maybe got in that whole hearing. Can you talk on that?
Oh, sure. you know, we were in our New Paradigm Institute staff that were there were in communication with Congressman Burleson. In fact, you may know, if you look back at the videos of the hearing, you'll see that Congressman Burleson is reading his cell phone. He's reading questions off his cell phone, which we were communicating to him well, as he was sitting there asking the questions. And in the open hearing, Lou actually gave some of those answers. They kind of got lost in the kind of energy of the whole hearing, but Burleson specifically asked him, and so did Nancy Mace. Is our government in possession of a non-human spacecraft? And he said yes, actually, in the hearing. But they were kind of shooting the questions at him very quickly, and as he was answering each of those questions, people it kind of went by so fast they didn't grasp the import of it. I think that the most important question, one of which I personally sent to Burleson, was he asked Lou straight out. He said, "Look, if you and I were to get into a skiff, this top secret container, and given the fact that we have the clearances that we do, would you be able to provide to me the proof that is absolutely definitive that we are in possession of an extraterrestrial non-human spacecraft and the bodies of non-humans that pilot these, and that we're back engineering the technology of these? Would you be able to give me that definitive proof?" And Lou said, "I would not be authorized to do that. It would require someone above me to make that decision." Now, that was an extraordinarily important point in the hearing, because Lou was actually telling him that the Congress of the United States is not authorized to know this yet. Okay, and that should have sent the Congress people right up out of their seats and saying, "Wait, you're saying that you know the information and you're refusing to tell me the information?" And so there's someone above you that it would have to make that decision as to whether Congress is going to be informed, but they haven't followed up on that, you know, and they didn't follow up on that in written questions. But Burleson did ask these questions, and Lou was really quite straightforward with regard to the first few of them. He just flat out said, "Yes, yes, I am telling you that we are in possession of a non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft, more than one. Number two, we have in fact recovered biological specimens from the craft and realized that the occupants were non-human." He's confirmed that. And a couple of the other ones, he basically backed up and said, "There are people who have asserted this that I believe to be credible." You know, two of the questions he answered that way,
Yeah,
which still puts it into a hearsay kind of setting. But the first few questions that he was asked, he stated flat out that we've got those craft. And they asked him, does he know where they are? And he said, yes. Yeah, he does know. And he actually talked about one of the sites that was on this river, this naval, that I knew that. I knew that one of them was there, but not from Lou. So the Congress, if they ask the right questions, Lou will give them the answers that he is authorized to give them. So there's still a lot more information that Lou knows that he's capable of giving to those who have the proper security clearances. But there is some information clearly that Lou does in fact know that he's not authorized to tell Congress. And that is a problem. That is a problem, because to have a witness right in front of you who knows the information and you're saying, we're willing to do it in secret, we're willing to do it pursuant to our national security clearances that we have, and you're telling us that you still won't give us the information, that's a problem. That's a constitutional problem. And that is what was concerning Lou. Lou was very concerned that the Constitution of the United States is not being adequately respected by elements within the national security state bureaucracy. That's something he has been very clear about, and it's a part of his complaint that he filed early on. So he's prepared to participate in facilitating how to get the information, because the question is he authorized to tell the people in Congress with the proper security clearances who the people are who do know the information and who are willing to tell them and who are able to authorize telling them. That's a step that hasn't been taken yet, but it does have to be taken.
With this new administration, and excuse my ignorance, should that not be really easy for the new president and the folks he has put in charge of all these different organizations and positions to secure that?
No, because you need to understand that there's an element deep within the national security state of the United States that is fundamentally and profoundly unconstitutional, and that they are so convinced that that the elected representatives can't be trusted, and that even the president of the United States is only a temporary employee of the government at any given time for 4 to 8 years, and that they cannot be trusted, and they will not tell them. That's why it's going to be so important for the task force that Comer has set up now in the House Oversight Committee to have subpoena power, and to subpoena these people to come in, and to compel them to answer the questions. They have to conduct themselves, in effect, like a grand jury. And they've got to subpoena the people, demand the documents under subpoena, as duce tecum, they call it, to bring them in and engage in a confrontational undertaking against the deep state. Because until this group that is in charge of the UFO and ET secrets are dug out and exposed, President Trump is not going to be able to deal with the deep state. These people are the core of the deep state, and they reach into all kinds of other areas. But this is the core of the deep state. This is the most profound, deep secret that is held by the people that are operational in the deep state, and they will not voluntarily tell the president, and they will not voluntarily tell the Congress. They're going to have to be compelled to do that. And that's why I've been asked to draft the complaint under the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act, the federal criminal complaint against these people. And I'm in communication with high-level people inside the Justice Department and inside the FBI who are perfectly prepared to go forward with criminally prosecuting these people. That will put the fear of God in them. You know, that's coming to get them if they're going to continue to. And up to this point in time, they haven't been threatened with that. They know they can get away with anything they want, and that nobody's going to do anything to them. So that we have to do that, and we have to invoke the entire power of the United States government and our criminal prosecutorial authority to dig these people out and to get this information from them and get it into the hands of the responsible people in Congress who have the adequate security clearances and can be adequately trusted to exercise authority on behalf of our people concerning this information. That's the key to this interview. That's the key to this interview.
It seems a lot of the names that you would want to either speak to in a skiff or get the good information from are about to appear in a documentary, Age of Disclosure, from
Yes.
Dan Farah.
Yes.
This was kind of long rumored before Lou's book came out, when Lou's book came out. Dan Farah was the agent that helped put a lot of those things together.
Yes.
Can a documentary move the needle in such a way that some are claiming this can?
Oh, yes. You know, and that is going to. I have no doubt at all about it. That documentary is going to be a significant event. And therefore, we have to prepare the Congress, specifically this task force in the House Oversight Committee, to respond immediately and to bring those people, some of those people together with them in a skiff and say, okay, Clapper, for example, you have flat out asserted that this is true. Okay, tell us how you know it's true. Who did you talk to? What have you seen? You know, and then we subpoena those people and bring them in. But they're going to have to start right from the beginning subpoenaing these people. And the problem is that they don't want to do that. It's all, oh, let's ask them to voluntarily appear to begin with. And then they lawyer up, and the lawyers tell them not to agree to do it voluntarily. Then they go back and forth, and they start chewing away at the 6 months time limit. Okay, so they've got to start right from the very beginning, treating this just exactly like a federal criminal litigation or a grand jury, and issue those subpoenas and stop, mollycoddling around and thinking that the deep state people are going to cooperate with them, because they're not. We have to go after them as the criminals that they are, and dig this out. And in like all criminal investigations, there's going to have to be consideration for giving some of the people some degree of immunity in order to get their testimony. And there's a whole pilot program now in the Justice Department that authorizes the granting of what they call non-prosecution agreement letters. We're very much aware of this now, in that I'm perfectly willing to participate in granting a non-prosecution agreement letter to certain individuals to get the information that we need, and they will be immunized against any criminal prosecution. I'm a great believer in it. Wrote my honors thesis at the undergraduate school at Harvard in the Fifth Amendment. So I'm not in favor of coercing people who are believing that they are personally criminally liable to give that information. But that we've got this whole pilot program going on in the FBI now about the granting of these non-prosecution agreement letters that we can utilize. And the committee needs to know about this, and I'm sure they don't yet. But they need to have a very powerful general counsel for that task force that's been put together by Comer and Luna, and they've got to go after them, just like a special prosecutor would, and go get this information. And while we're trying to expand the period of time from the 6 months to the 2 years, but as long as we have the 6 month limit right now in place, this has got to be done with dispatch and seriously, right away.
Danny, that's probably a good place to get into some listener questions if you're up for that.
Sure.
I had a lot of them sent over to me, which jump all over the place, but there's some really good stuff in here. So thank you to everyone who sent them over. First off, from Nick, he says, would Danny expect there to be any connections to UFOs in the forthcoming JFK document release?
Yes. Yeah. No, but it's not what people think. I mean, people, this rumor has been around for a long time. Oh, JFK asked to get the information about UFOs, and they didn't want to give it to him, so they killed him. That it's not like that. That's just a reductionist, simple-minded analysis of. But what really happened is that immediately after the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962, President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, the Russian president, were so personally traumatized about how close they had come to a major thermonuclear war that they began to exchange a series of totally secret letters outside of the authorized channels. The CIA didn't know about it. The Justice Department didn't know it. Nobody. They were exchanging letters through a fellow by Norman Cousins was actually delivering the letters back and forth to Khrushchev and to Kennedy. There were 18 letters that were exchanged, and in those letters, President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev were actually planning to exercise their respective executive power authority to start to physically disassemble the nuclear warheads of both of those nuclear arsenals and to destroy them. Not to just set them aside so they could be put back on missiles, at a moment's notice, but to destroy them. They were actually engaged in that process. And what President Kennedy did is said he would, in fact, propose to replace the massive military spending that both countries had engaged in historically in this Cold War that stimulated their economies. They would substitute for that a major joint Soviet and United States space program exploring outer space. And in that context, Kennedy on June 5th of 1963 reached out and demanded to have full access to all of the UFO and ET information that was available inside our national security state. And they refused to give it to him because they knew he was getting set to give it to Nikita Khrushchev as a show of good faith. They were so desperately devoted to trying to get to disassemble the nuclear warheads and destroy them that he had to convince Nikita Khrushchev that he was in good faith about a genuinely united space exploration program with the Soviet Union and the United States, and that this would help to dispel the Cold War. Okay, and when they refused to give him that, and they realized that's what led them to discover that he was having these conversations with Nikita Khrushchev through these secret letters. And as soon as they realized what those were, it was the China lobby. It was the group of people that said, we cannot possibly allow the disassembly and destruction of the nuclear warheads of our nuclear arsenal because we need them against China, not against the Soviet Union. And this is something that we had direct conversations with President Gorbachev about, is that it was that element, the China lobby that wanted to exploit the natural resources of Asia economically and commercially. These are the people that were behind the decision to say that this cannot be allowed. This man has to be eliminated. And that was Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles, not in his capacity as a disgruntled, fired CIA director as a result of the fiasco of the Bay of Pigs, but it was in his capacity as general counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman, the major private investment group that were devoted to shifting their economic target over to Asia. And this is a long and this is something that I'll have to be giving in some detail to the task force dealing with the JFK assassination. But you can see that there's a way in which it's related because it was his demand for all the UFO and ET information that tipped off the national security state people that he was having these other secret conversations with Nikita Khrushchev. And the reason that I know about it is because the person who was going to broker the agreement to cover the systematic disassembly and destruction of the nuclear warheads was Pope John the 23rd, because Kennedy trusted him implicitly, and Nikita Khrushchev trusted him explicitly. And it was Nikita Khrushchev that recommended that it be Pope John the 23rd that actually brokered the agreement and made sure that it was enforced. So that whole process was going on, which is a complete and total secret that like nobody knows about. That I happen to know about because I was at Jesuit headquarters, and that the Jesuit order, as you know, is not only the largest order inside the Catholic Church, but it's also most of the foreign diplomats and intelligence operations. And so we were privy to that information. And so the time has come to make that clear to people now as to what happened. And that's the relationship that it has to the demand for the UFO information. But it wasn't the demand for the UFO information itself that triggered the decision that was made by Allen Dulles to authorize the assassination team to kill the president that had been created back in 1960 to kill Fidel Castro and Raul Castro. And that was done by Richard Nixon, which was the key to the Watergate burglary. That's why when Richard Nixon told Haldeman to go over to the agency and talk to Vernon Walters and to Dick Helms and to tell them to get the hell out of this investigation right now, he was talking about the assassination of President Kennedy. And so this will all come out. This will all come out. This is an extraordinarily important task force for disclosure. If something is getting ready to happen, like you can tell, all of the people, Lou Elizondo and Colonel Nell and Chris Mellon and all the people. I keep on telling people, you know, we've got to solve this problem quickly. We've got to get information out. There's something getting ready to happen, you know, here. And if we're going to have a purgative process go on here of being able to cleanse the sins, if you will, of the United States national security state, we have to do this, and we need to do it now if we're going to be prepared to reach out to the extraterrestrial civilization and demonstrate to them our goodwill in trying to overcome this kind of, if you will, sinful past. And it requires not only repentance, it requires penance. So there's going to have to be some pain here. There's going to have to be some painful coming to grips with reality here if we're going to purge ourselves of these sins and to have a clean conscience in dealing with the extraterrestrial beings, because that is something that they demand. That is something that they demand. A conscious, honest species to join their civilization, and that we're not yet there.
Really interesting in that information on that, and makes me want to go back and watch some of those old JFK movies I watched when, even as a young kid, I used to watch some of those in my grands, and even some of the Watergate stuff as well, believe it or not. So really interesting story. A lot of people asked about the drone situation, because this is something that came up at the end of the Biden administration, or Kamala Harris administration, as it appeared to be for the final months, into the Trump administration. And Trump used this, I will let everyone know what's happening with these drones. Within days, they came out and said, yeah, these were FAA approved, and there was nothing to see here. So many folks have since come forward and said, either that's correct, that's not correct, including, was it Senator, had his name, Mark Kelly, former astronaut.
Yeah.
He told Matt Laszlo of Askapol that the drones were adversarial tech. So what do you know about the drone situation, Danny?
That I don't know yet. The old saying, I say that I don't get paid to guess. That, you know, that we do serious investigations. When we're charged with responsibility for conducting an investigation, we get to it and we find out the answer. I don't know yet what the answer is. I do know that there are a percentage of those so-called drones that were in fact performing activities that were well beyond the capacity of any known drone technology. And the people inside the UFO community are rapid to jump on, say, oh, they were clearly UFOs, and they're all concealing it. It's not clear yet, because we do know that the United States national security state has in fact mocked up a number of craft, a fairly significant number of craft apparently, that perform some of the type of performance that the UFOs can. And so they can very clearly mask themselves as UFOs. But we don't know exactly what the percentages were of those craft that may have been man-made craft, but very special mocked up UFOs. We don't know if there were any real UFOs in that mix, but there were clearly a number of law enforcement drones that were trying to find out what was going on. And there's a very specific body of information which bears much more scrutiny, that they were testing. This was a readiness exercise, a military readiness exercise, testing a particular type of drone that was capable of discerning radioactive signatures. Not that it was necessarily engaged in seeking a real loose nuke, as some people have suggested, that disappeared from the Ukraine and was reported to be somewhere on the East Coast, and that they were intensely looking for it. But there's some real reason to look into one of the theories, and that is that they were testing a new technology of a particular drone that was capable of discerning radiation, and so they could search for an actual loose nuke if it happened in the future. And this was a readiness exercise And one of the challenges is that this particular technology, this drones, were also equipped with completely, well, I guess you could use the term, it's an unconstitutional technology, that they were able to spy on American citizens, that they were able to through heat signatures to be able to determine how many people are inside a building. They even have potential face recognition technology on them to be able to spy on people from the sky. It was a spy even closer down than the satellites with better definition, in that they had buried inside these drones the capacity to spy on the American public, and there's a history of them doing things like that, hiding behind the most sensitive national security technologies, the technology for spying on the American public politically. That I can go into some detail later in another program about all that, but we know that's true. And there's an argument that that may be what they were doing. They were testing that particular technology, and they masked it with throwing up all kinds of other drones and stuff to mask that. But we don't know yet. We don't know if that's true or not. But if in fact we get put in a position of needing to know that information, we'll look at that. But the New Paradigm Institute is primarily focused now on getting disclosure of what we already know, and get that revealed to the American public and the world pertaining to the UFO phenomena. That's what we're doing right now is our priority.
Another Daniel got in touch and said, "Hi Andy, what does Danny think of the claims of Chris Bledsoe he's making about the second coming of Christ in Easter 2026? It seems his CIA and other agency friends have taken this very seriously. What is Danny's interpretation of all of this? Is it just aliens playing tricks, or is there a spiritual religious connection?"
Serious. I know Chris quite well. I've spent a lot of time with Chris. It's clear to me that Chris Bledsoe believes this, which is important. The question as to what exactly is going on, I haven't been down to Chris's house. He's invited me to come down to actually witness some of these things going on there. But I know that some very important people from the national security state, have gone down to his home and witnessed some of these things going on, and that they've had some fairly serious conversations with him. It's CIA people, CIA domestic intelligence people, military people, and John Alexander and others have been down. Jim Simivan has been down to see him. I know that some people are doing now. They seem to be taking very seriously whatever it is that's going on, but it's not clear that they're taking seriously what Chris's interpretation is about that. And Chris very clearly has this very heavy Christian overlay on his experience. He's prisming it through his kind of devout Christianity, and almost Catholic, because he's viewing this feminine being that he associates with some of the orbs as being a Mary, a Mother Mary, feminine being. And so I've talked with Chris about it, and I'm going to see Chris again just in another couple of weeks here up in Ashland, and so that's we'll know more about that. But I do know that's how he's perceiving this, and it raises an extremely important specific issue, and that is the potential relationship between the UFO phenomenon and the orbs, of course, and the traditional religious beliefs of our human family. That whole question about the degree to which some of the UFO phenomena down over the centuries may have been interpreted as the traditional religious beliefs that have grown in the American or in the human family. So this is an issue of important exploration for the religious communities. In Jesuit headquarters back in 1977, we actually presented to the coalition of the major 54 major religious denominations. The Jesuit order was involved in helping to organize that, Washington Interreligious Staff Council. And we proposed to them back in early 1977 that a joint task force be set up to come to grips with the issue of extraterrestrial life and intelligence. They just basically stared at us like deer in the headlights when we proposed it to them, and then they went on to some other subject. But this is something that is going to have to be done. We're going to have to come to grips with this. I don't know that that Chris is going to be any kind of major point leader in this process, but he's having a very genuine experience, and I'm sure he believes that this is the proper interpretation of what's happening to him. And we'll see how this process goes, but it's going to be, in my opinion, much more complex and more sophisticated than just the way that Chris is experiencing it.
I think you've put that across very fairly, and just so no one's confused, I've often commented on the orb phenomenon being something that I believe in it, but I think a lot of the video evidence is lacking, and points of light in the sky aren't orbs. Chris Bledsoe, I've hosted on the podcast, and Ryan some time ago, and I believe Chris did have a truly unique experience, and the sheer volume of folks from various three-letter organizations who have been involved with him and his family point to something happening. I don't believe that the volume of things he reports now are necessarily UEP related all the time. And I think maybe that comes down to that interpretation, as you say. A couple of nights ago, he very clearly filmed the International Space Station passing the moon because people correlated the time, the date, where he lives. And Chris posted it as, here's an orb. Loads of folks believe it. A lot of folk don't. But I think you have to be able to look at this topic and say, no, that's not an orb. It doesn't necessarily take away from the origins of Chris and his story.
That's right.
But it doesn't always mean what he's seeing now as that. So I think interpretation's a good way of putting that, Danny.
I think that's accurate. I think that's an accurate analysis.
Yeah. And again, people can make mistakes or post something. No one's infallible in all of this.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't take away that, well, that means the whole topic's nonsense. So
Right.
I'd always stress that. My least favorite name of anyone who sends anything in, because I can't say it, Purple Burglar, which is a very difficult thing to say in a Scottish accent, says, I have a question about the government baiting UAPs with nukes. How is it that the UAPs fall for the same trap and get downed by the government using the same tactics over and over again? Shouldn't they be far smarter than that, falling for it time and again? Or are these vehicles they send unmanned and disposable?
Yeah, no, he's gotten a little bit confused there. The utilization of the UAP or UFO technology to potentially transport nuclear delivery systems is not being done by the ET people, and being duped into working with our military. It's the back engineering of their technology in the design of a fake UFO, a man-made UFO that is potentially being utilized to help transport and deliver nuclear weapons. That's what's going on.
I think what he meant on the question, Danny, it may have been how I read it, but about the government baiting UAPs with nukes, as in drawing them in using nuclear weapons.
That no. The U.S. Again, you're conflating two or three different things. That Lou talks about this in his book, Imminent, where Lou was one of the people proposing a thing they call the honey trap, of assembling a nuclear task force, aircraft carrier, submarines, etc., and being kind of a really tempting target for the UFO surveillance to come in to surveil such a gathering, and then use that opportunity to trap them and to shoot them down or knock them down. That was a very specific thing that they were talking about doing. And the interest of the UFO vehicles and the occupants in our nuclear facilities is very real and a very genuine one. And that it has been their craft that have actually engaged in shutting off not only the nuclear missiles, but also aircraft carriers nuclear aircraft carriers and submarines, of actually rising up out of the sea and disabling an entire nuclear aircraft carrier task force. Richard Dolan is going to be coming out right this week with the first volume of a 3-volume study that he's doing on unidentified submerged objects, the USOs. I think there were 400. I think that in talking with Rich, something like 400 plus instances of this that he recounts in his 3 volumes that he's going to be coming out with, and so that these activities of the United States military deploying nuclear weapon systems has been the subject of very real surveillance on the part of the UFOs, and that's why Lou and others had come up with this idea of trying to bait the term that the burglar is using here, to bait their coming in to do the surveillance and then trying to trap them and to knock down their UFO with this new electronic pulse weapon that they've been using to actually knock down UFOs. That's true and extraordinarily unfortunate. I mean, that's engaging in warfare basically against these craft, because they view them as a threat to the national security because they're doing the surveillance of our nuclear capabilities. But the bottom line is that I am completely opposed to doing that, and it backs us up into the question relating to Jake Barber. You know, remember that Jake Barber is now saying that, and everybody's extraordinarily excited about this whole thing, that Jake Barber is in a private capacity has assembled a team of people that he is going to be engaging psionics, of reaching out telepathically to try to draw in some of these craft, but they're talking about apparently capturing them, not just videoing them, and not just showing, oh, here they are, they're coming and approaching, but I'm deeply concerned, so is the New Paradigm Institute, about potentially utilizing the capacity of psionics in mental telepathy to attract these craft, and then engaging in some sort of aggressive hostile action toward them. Now, this is especially dangerous if it's being done by our U.S. military, but it's also dangerous if it's being done by some private aerospace corporation, you know, for whom he's working. And his task force are employed by, you know, that there's, well, even though there's an independent outside funder that's funding their team's operations, they've been engaged in this activity. People haven't really grokked this. You know, his activity of recovering this egg and these other things is inside some range. You know, it's a privately owned area where there's a private aerospace corporation, Grumman, actually, aerospace corporation that he was employed by, and to have the commercial for private profit corporations engaged in trying to capture their own craft, the UFO craft, is just slightly less ominous an activity than our United States military taking them down and trying to reverse engineer them. Neither one of these two motives, in our opinion, is appropriate. You know, trying to either gain some explicit military advantage over Russia or China by back engineering these craft, by knocking them down and taking their technology, or the private commercial industry, you know, trying to capture these vehicles so that they can get patents on these technologies. I think both of those are low consciousness motivations. And that therefore the private citizen groups, civilian, non-commercially motivated civilian groups gathering and reaching out to establish telepathic communication with the craft and demonstrate our openness and friendliness toward them is an important alternative dynamic that I think really needs to be undertaken. And I'm going to do whatever I can in talking with Ross Coulthart and the folks, and getting to hopefully talk with Jake and Fred Baker and some of the other folks to make certain that that type of lower consciousness motive is not going to characterize their activities, because even the person who's financing those activities comes from a major private investment group. You know, I do not want, and our New Paradigm Institute does not want the exploration of space and the reaching out to our extraterrestrial neighbors to be motivated by private commercial profit making, you know, any more than we want it to be dominated by United States military efforts to establish superiority over areas of space. We don't want either one of those things to characterize this outreach and solicitation of communications with the extraterrestrial beings. That's our position.
I'll just mention here that if folks are listening to this, my next interview is with Richard Dolan on his USO series, so people will be able to listen to that one, Danny, a few days after this interview comes out. So, and then after that is Jacques Vallée. So some really important figures and names all kind of back to back coming up for people to listen to, and at a really interesting time as well. Ryan says, "Hi Danny, if half the stuff you've asserted is real, then we're in something crazier than Star Trek. What do you actually believe is going on versus what you've been told?"
Well, I don't. We have to exercise great care here not to speculate overly beyond the things that we have obtained information and credible evidence to support here. You know, that this is that I've told the story a number of times that you know that they try to train you at Harvard Law School to just accept the facts that you've got direct admissible evidence on in order to kind of develop your theories of what's going on in a particular case. In this particular case, that given the fact that I've been at this for 47 years now and have had access to not only the classified information that was in Project Blue Book, you know, when I was working as special counsel to the Congressional Research Service investigation asked for by President Carter, but I've also interviewed people that were staff people in Project Blue Book, investigating the secret 700 plus cases that they were unable to explain away. I've interviewed direct people that were employed in that project, and have interviewed them and discerned what I believe about what they're saying and what they're not. I've also engaged in vetting a lot of the numerous witnesses. When I was legal counsel for the Disclosure Project with Dr. Greer, I've interviewed lots and lots of people, including Clifford Stone and a lot of the people who've had direct face-to-face encounters with the UFO craft and recovery of bodies, etc. And as the legal counsel for Lou, I've been able to meet and talk with and interview the people who have very important information about this. Nothing that's been classified that they weren't allowed to talk with me about. But the bottom line is, I have access, I think, to considerably more information than 99% of everybody else. You know, and based on that, there are some very specific things that I believe. And in fact, what we're doing is at the New Paradigm Institute, we are preparing right now a list of 100 facts that we're going to be putting forward to all of our people that are in our Citizens for Disclosure movement. We're going to have groups in every one of the 435 congressional districts in the United States, in all 50 states, and a number of them in other countries right now, where we're going to be providing the information, say, look, here are the first 100 facts that our New Paradigm Institute is declaring to be true, and that you can take these to the bank. You know, there's a lot of other information that's around, that's still speculative, or there's some evidence on that we haven't been able to actually completely confirm yet. and that those other facts will be added to this list of 100 facts as we vet them and come to believe them. So those are going to be available in the near future. So you'll see what it is that we've come to conclude is really true. And this is made up of information, and we'll have footnotes and links to the actual evidence that supports each of these, so that people will see that this isn't just aimless speculation on our part. This is evidence that we believe meets the standards of Rule 11 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, that support a good faith conclusion that these things are true. And we believe that given access to the discovery process, in this case, given access to the investigative process of the task force that's put together in the House of Representatives, that we can extract the evidence that will be court admissible under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, in the rules of evidence, that will be admissible to put in front of the jury of the American people. And that's the standard that we're using here. And so therefore, for just an example, that I believe that there's convincing evidence that there are at least five very specific species that are extraterrestrial in origin, who are in fact coming here to our planet, and that the UFOs are vehicles by means of which they transit from their separate star system to here. Okay, I believe that they are part of a task force, basically, that's been assembled inside our galaxy to explore planets where life has actually evolved, and that they are exploring sort of as an anthropology kind of experiment, looking at the life forms of what stage that we're all in. And it's in this capacity that they've been coming to our planet, monitoring the development of our species, monitoring our activities toward each other, looking toward setting up some sort of standards by means of which, when we reach a point where we're prepared to venture out into space, into their territory, that they can make themselves assured that we're not going to bring military weaponry. And so I believe that we are, in a sense, quarantined right now. That as long as we are going to insist upon bringing nuclear weapons and undertake aggressive military action to try to establish our superiority with regard to gathering together for ourselves the strategic raw materials that we believe our major business corporations need to maintain profit and stimulate our economies, that we're not going to be allowed to come out there. Every type of experiment that we do to try to get outside of our own solar system is going to be thwarted until we've overcome these deficiencies that we have in our culture right now. I believe that's true. I also believe that there is a very genuine spiritual dimension to the culture that the UFO people have developed. I don't know yet. Our new paradigm is it doesn't quite know yet what the nature of the juridical structure is of their relationship with each other, of these at least five species, whether they have some sort of federation that they're in, whether they've established some sort of mutual compact as to how they will conduct themselves with regard to our human family. We don't know these things yet, but I do believe that there is a spiritual dimension to the undertaking that they're engaged in. Now, I also our New Paradigm Institute has had lots of communications with Reed Marshall, Marshall Summers, and Reed Summers and the others that in the allies of humanity that realize that there may well be some commercial interest that the extraterrestrial species have in, but that it seems that the resource that they might be interested in on our planet is actually specimens of life, different types of flora and fauna, for the potential seeding of life on other planets in our galaxy. that are capable of sustaining life like this. And so that it's a different than, you know, coming here for our you know, trying to take all of our resources or mine all of our gold or take all of our any other natural resource, but it's the actual life that has evolved on our planet here. Seems to be a potential resource that they're involved in harvesting to some extent. These are some of the things that we believe at this particular stage, predicated on the evidence that we have. That I do believe very clearly, and our institute believes that there is in fact a hybridizing project that's underway. That they are in fact, you know, gene splicing the chromosome from their species and ours, and gestating hybrid beings. This is an extraordinarily important issue. And you'll notice that Congress has not gone anywhere near this, near this. And none of the witnesses that are going to be testifying to them in the immediate near future are going anywhere near this. But it's an extraordinarily important aspect of the encounter that we're having with the extraterrestrial civilization. And so that this bears important additional scrutiny, because this threatens to, you know, transgress some important barriers that we would want from our human family, not to have our people involuntarily abducted, you know, involuntarily impregnated, you know, involuntarily generating hybrids of our species. These are things that we have to have a meaningful conversation with the ET beings, and that we need to do it as a human family. And that's why the reaching out to them from the civilian point of view, non-commercial civilian point of view, and expressing our beliefs to them and attempting to persuade them to respect our independence and dignity, and to maintain some of the important values that we have pertaining to privacy, pertaining to free speech and free religious beliefs, etc. That these are all things that are an important part of the conversation that we need to have with them. And they cannot be prisoned through the national security state and the military. This needs to be a civilian undertaking on the part of our citizenry. So these are some of the things that we have come to believe at this point, and that these are going to be things that are put forth in our 100 facts that we're going to be releasing from the New Paradigm Institute in the foreseeable future here. And we will add to them as we garner more and more information and come to conclusions about additional facts.
Well, Danny, we're at the end of our time together, and that's probably a nice place to leave it. How can folks sign up to the New Paradigm Institute newsletter I mentioned before, and obviously find out about things like those 100 facts that are coming soon?
Yes, easy. It's newparadigminstitute.org. And you'll find there all of the links to the various podcasts that carry information that we find to be credible. You'll find our list of 100 facts when it's prepared. And you can join through that. You can become members of the New Paradigm Institute and volunteer to engage in activities working with us. And you can, very importantly, become members of Citizens for Disclosure, which are going to be working in detail in all 435 congressional districts in all 50 states to work with our congressional members and our United States senators to get Congress to step into this role and take control of this particular issue away from the exclusive hands of the national security state. This is an extraordinarily important mission of the New Paradigm Institute. And when we get this objective accomplished to secure our disclosure here, we're talking about trying to formulate a new paradigm worldview that can actually integrate all of this information of the other civilization around us, what their understanding of physics is, what their understanding of the origins of our universe are, understanding, you know, what the ultimate outcome of our universe may be. If they've had several million years more, several billion years more in some cases, time to look into this, to share this information. And how do we integrate this into adjusting our geopolitical structures on our planet, our political structures, our economic structures, and very importantly, our theological structures? How do we, that's the New Paradigm Institute's mission. But we first have to get the disclosure so that we know what the information is that our government knows about, and establish direct diplomatic relations through our citizenry with the members of the extraterrestrial civilization, so that we have a citizen diplomacy exchange of information outside of the military and commercial ventures. NewParadigmInstitute.org.
I'll put all those links in the description as well for you, Danny, okay?
I appreciate that.